The Akkadian Empire was the world's first true empire, uniting much of Mesopotamia under a single ruler during the late 3rd millennium BC. Founded by Sargon of Akkad, it brought together diverse cities, languages, and cultures into a centralized political system. At its height, the empire controlled vast trade networks, maintained standing armies, and imposed imperial administration over formerly independent city-states. Akkadian rulers adopted Sumerian culture while enforcing imperial authority, creating an unprecedented level of political integration. Monumental inscriptions celebrated imperial power, and Akkadian became the dominant language of governance. For a time, the empire appeared unstoppable, yet beneath its strength lay fragile foundations. The Akkadian Empire expanded rapidly, but sustaining such a system required stability that the environment, economy, and political structure would ultimately fail to provide. The primary cause of the Akkadian Empire's collapse was severe climate change that triggered widespread environmental crises. Around 2200 BC, Mesopotamia experienced prolonged drought linked to a regional climate shift. Rainfall declined dramatically, rivers weakened, and agricultural production collapsed across northern and central regions. The empire depended heavily on consistent grain supplies to feed cities, support armies, and maintain administration. As crops failed, famine spread rapidly. Rural populations abandoned farmland, while cities faced food shortages and unrest. Imperial logistics could not compensate for widespread ecological failure. Unlike localized disasters, this drought affected the entire imperial system simultaneously. The Akkadian Empire, built on agricultural surplus, could not function without it. Climate change undermined the economic and demographic foundation of imperial power. As the climate crisis intensified, the Akkadian economic system began to collapse in a cascading failure. The empire depended on a centralized system of tribute, grain taxation, and redistribution to support cities, armies, and administrators. When prolonged drought reduced harvests, provincial regions could no longer deliver surplus grain to imperial centers. Food prices rose sharply, shortages became common, and famine conditions spread among urban populations. Trade networks that once connected Akkad to Anatolia, the Levant, and the Persian Gulf weakened as surplus production disappeared. Craftsmen, merchants, and laborers lost livelihoods, forcing many to abandon cities entirely. Economic specialization collapsed, replaced by subsistence survival. The Akkadian economy had been designed for abundance, not scarcity, and once surplus vanished, the empire's financial and logistical systems unraveled rapidly, leaving the state unable to function effectively. Economic collapse directly translated into political instability across the Akkadian Empire. Imperial authority relied on steady resources to reward loyalty, maintain garrisons, and enforce law in distant regions. As shortages worsened, provincial governors and local elites increasingly acted independently, prioritizing survival over imperial obedience. Rebellions erupted in multiple cities, overwhelming the empire's ability to respond. Communication networks slowed, and military deployments became unreliable due to lack of supplies. The centralized Akkadian political system lacked flexibility in crisis, making rapid adaptation impossible. Kings who once claimed divine favor lost legitimacy as they failed to provide security and food. Political fragmentation spread quickly, turning the empire's vast size into a liability. Authority that had been imposed through strength dissolved when the state could no longer sustain itself. As internal stability collapsed, the Akkadian Empire became militarily vulnerable. Armies that once enforced imperial rule required constant food, equipment, and administrative support. With agriculture failing and taxation breaking down, soldiers went unpaid and underfed. Garrisons were abandoned and border defenses weakened dramatically. Nomadic and highland groups surrounding Mesopotamia observed this growing weakness. The Gudians, among others, moved into imperial territory not as the original cause of collapse, but as opportunistic beneficiaries of Akkad's failure. Military defeat followed economic and political breakdown. The empire could no longer project force or protect cities. In this way, invasion marked the final stage of collapse rather than its origin, sealing the fate of an empire already hollowed from within. Attempts to restore Akkadian authority failed because the environmental crisis did not end with political collapse. Drought conditions persisted for decades, limiting agricultural recovery, even after imperial control weakened. Fields remained unproductive, irrigation systems deteriorated, and populations continued to decline. Any effort to revive centralized administration faced the same ecological limits that destroyed the empire. Without reliable food production, large cities could not be sustained. This demonstrates how environmental collapse can outlast political systems, preventing recovery even after leadership changes. The Akkadian Empire was not merely overthrown, it was rendered impossible by long-term environmental exhaustion that permanently reduced the region's capacity to support imperial life. Beyond environmental and economic collapse, deep social breakdown acted as a powerful secondary cause accelerating the fall of the Akkadian Empire. As drought, famine, and insecurity spread across Mesopotamia, the relationship between the imperial state and its subjects fundamentally changed. Ordinary people no longer experienced benefits from imperial rule, such as protection, food security, or economic opportunity. Instead, they faced heavier demands for tribute and labor at a time when survival itself was uncertain. Social trust between elites and common populations eroded rapidly. Urban unrest increased, and cooperation essential for maintaining large administrative systems disappeared. Religious confidence in the king's divine legitimacy weakened as disasters continued unchecked. Without shared belief, loyalty, or mutual obligation, the social fabric holding the empire together unraveled. This internal collapse of cohesion made recovery impossible, even before external pressures intensified. The collapse of long-distance trade further weakened the Akkadian Empire and hastened its decline. Akkadian cities relied heavily on exchange networks to obtain essential resources, such as timber, stone, copper, and luxury goods. As agricultural surpluses vanished due to drought, the empire lost its ability to participate in these networks. Merchants disappeared, marketplaces emptied, and ports fell silent. Without imported materials, construction projects halted and defensive infrastructure deteriorated. Economic isolation reduced the importance of major cities, making them unattractive places to live. Populations gradually dispersed into smaller rural communities, better suited to survival in harsh conditions. Trade collapse did not merely reduce wealth, it undermined the urban system itself. Cities that had once been engines of imperial power became unsustainable, accelerating abandonment and demographic decline across the empire. Over time, the Akkadian Empire dissolved rather than collapsed in a single dramatic moment. As food shortages persisted and urban life became unsustainable, populations gradually migrated away from imperial centers. Cities lost administrative relevance, temples fell into neglect, and imperial identity faded from daily life. Former provinces ceased recognizing central authority, functioning independently or reverting to localized rule. Infrastructure decayed without maintenance, and once busy streets emptied. Akkad's disappearance was the result of long-term structural failure rather than sudden destruction. Environmental collapse removed the foundation of the imperial system, while economic, social, and political institutions crumbled in response. What remained was not a conquered empire, but a fragmented landscape where centralized power could no longer exist. The fall of the Akkadian Empire offers one of history's clearest lessons about the limits of power. The empire did not collapse primarily because of invasion or rebellion, but because climate-driven environmental change destroyed its agricultural foundation. From this primary cause flowed economic collapse, political fragmentation, social breakdown, and finally, military vulnerability. Each layer of the imperial system depended on the stability of the one beneath it. When the environment failed, the entire structure followed. Akkad's collapse demonstrates that even the most innovative and powerful empires remain dependent on ecological balance. Its legacy is not only that of the first empire, but of the first clear warning that no civilization can survive if it ignores the limits of its environment.